The Russian invasion is pushing the Ukrainian armed forces to rethink a lot of what they inherited from the Soviet past. To defeat the enemy, you must evolve and implement new ideas. Among such initiatives is the creation of assault forces and cyber forces within the Ukrainian armed forces. Is there anything similar in NATO forces? And what advantages can such changes bring? We ask Mark Montgomery, Rear Admiral, US Navy, and Charles Corcoran, Major General, US Air Force. Both are now retired but actively support the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Mr. Montgomery, shall we talk about the new forces in the Ukrainian defense framework? How do you assess the initiative to create assault forces and what role they may play in this war?
I understand the desire to have unique, aggressive forces that can be used in the breach in defense or to kind of be the assault breakers on the attack. So many militaries have separate air assault forces for exactly that purpose. So in the United States, we have the 82nd Airborne and the 101st Airborne, and they rotate being assigned to a national mission for national response, rapid response force mission. So the United States has some experience with preserving elite assault forces at the top, but we're not at the moment engaged in a war. In the end, I would defer to the senior leaders of the military to determine where's the best spot to put it.
That is, as far as I understand, there are no assault forces as a separate branch in the US military. You have airborne forces, and they perform this role of both rapid response and the retention or capture of specific territories.
So you're right, our air assault forces broadly belong to the Army and the Marine Corps, our ground forces. They're not uniquely pulled apart. However, that is for building the force, which is called force generation. For employing the force, the use of the force, then they can be pulled, they can be specially designated as national response forces.
Now, if you had such troops under your command, where would you deploy them in the midst of the Russo-Ukrainian war? Where would you deploy them first?
There are two big effects for them. The first and primary one is to achieve surprise and overwhelming force to gain the advantage. So if you think back to an operation like happened in Kursk, you would use them to break through for that. But the other time you can use them is to fill the gap when you have a defensive rupture and you have to rapidly reestablish the initiative. Then having a reserve of high-quality troops has strong value. You can go all the way back to Napoleon and Wellington and see that kind of usage. So it has both an offensive advantage and a defensive advantage if you're able to have the resources to do it.
Cyber forces are being created in Ukraine. What do you think about this initiative? Is there an equivalent in NATO countries?
So I'm excited to talk about this. Very few countries have developed kind of offensive cyber forces, surprisingly few. And I know Ukraine's thinking about this, and I absolutely support the establishment of a cyber force in Ukraine. So the United States is not doing this well. We get 30% from the Army, 30% from the Navy, 30% from the Air Force, 10% from the Marine Corps, and we bring it together. It is not the proper quality force generation because they're not the right people for cyber. The right people for cyber are very different than the right people for infantry or pilots or sailing. You need to be recruiting and drawing your personnel from e-gaming and robotics lab, not from the football pitch or basketball pitch, where you get the infantry. And the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines specialize in the physics, the sports, and not the cyber, the robotics. So having a unique cyber force recruits the right people and maybe says you don't have to be perfectly thin. Maybe you can have more tattoos. Maybe you can smoke some marijuana. All those kind of things that in the United States military you can't do if you're normal. And so I think I like the cyber force. And I think Ukraine is the military with the most active cyber going on. You should lead the way. And I think General Zursky or whoever has come up with this idea is very innovative and forward-thinking. And many NATO countries will follow Ukraine if Ukraine does this model. One quick thing. I should say, in America, I'm the most outspoken advocate for a cyber force. I've even emailed back and forth with President Trump about establishing a cyber force in the United States military.
This is a great way to pair these two questions together, because one of them is about creating a group of experts that understand a domain, cyber, land, air, sea, space. The other one is about how to operate with the forces you already have and organize them within a domain. It sounds like the land domain is the assault force. And so these are sort of two separate areas, right? I don't believe right now you have a cyber force. We don't have a dedicated cyber force in the U.S. We have our services providing cyber, and there is a roar building for us to build a cyber force as well, because again, it's a completely different domain, and you need experts in a domain to be raised to understand how to control and exploit that domain for the nation's security interests, and how to interact the tools from that domain to affect not only in that domain but across all the other domains. So I think the U.S. needs a cyber force. I think you need a cyber force. I think all the Western nations and NATO nations should have dedicated cyber professionals that understand and can talk to their air domain experts, their space domain, their land domain, their maritime domain about what cyber can do to help them in those areas. Look, everything we do is touched by cyber right now. There's not a single thing we do in day-to-day life or in warfighting that doesn't require cyber expertise. So I think it's fundamental that all of our militaries get more serious about cyber. Good thing for Ukraine, by the way, is you're a very digitally literate society. Very good. And so I think you have all the people available to build such a force. But I think it's key to do that.
Could you explain? Basically, cyber warfare units have long been part of many brigades. Why bring them together? Why organize them into separate forces? What could this do for us?
You're united for your recruitment, your training, your pay, the constant retraining, but you're dispersed for operations. What this will give you, if you bring them together into one force, what you do is you raise the quality of the recruit, the quality of the training, the better tools, special cyber tools to break into infrastructure, all gets improved by creating a singular force. And then you distribute them to the brigades, corps, operational forces to execute missions. Plus, you keep a good chunk with the general staff for strategic missions deep into Russian infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So you get the best of everything. I think a cyber force maximizes the power of Ukrainian cyber and ensures the highest quality offensive cyber operations by the Ukrainian Armed Forces.
You need experts on cyber. Cyber is driving everything in the world, including warfighting. And if we don't have cyber experts, we have cyber experts, but they're pulled from the Air Force and pulled from other services. We aren't raising them specifically to be focused on cyber. Again, all the .mil PFP, all of that. Who does that for cyber? Who does it for cyber in your Air Force? You can't ignore it. It is going to be a difference between winning and losing, not only in this war, but in future wars. Think of how AI is playing in anything. Think about all your communications, every one of your weapons. Cyber is crucial. It absolutely has to be at the front of everybody's thinking now and going forward.
What is the U.S. Space Force? Do you think Ukraine needs such force?
Again, it's a different domain, and so I think I think what we've learned through our experience, even in our Air Force. I'll go back to standing up the U.S. Air Force in the 1940s after World War II. It was a fight to get the Navy and the Army to agree that we needed an Air Force. But the nation realized that we need to raise a core of professionals dedicated to controlling and exploiting the air domain. And then as space became a thing in the 50s, We latched that onto the Air Force because we thought it was a natural extension. But what we found over time is that it wasn't a natural extension. We aren't raising professionals that know how to acquire the systems we need, operate the systems we need, day to day, train the people, all those things I was talking about, the doctrine. It was coming in second to air because it was part of the Air Force. And we had to split it off to make everybody understand, look, this is a war-fighting domain. Cyber enables all the comms and everything, but space is where we do, look, our communications, our global communications, our weather, our indications and warnings. You know, it's just imperative that we have professionals that are learning how to control and exploit that domain. I think it's no different for Ukraine. It can't be something you bolt on, add on, do separately. I think you need, you got to find the ability to take some of your resources and put there and have experts who can interact with your European partners in the US and talk that language, and then bring that capability in for your Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, special operations to use.
Ukraine is currently experimenting a lot with its armed forces on the battlefield. It is forced to do so because without testing new ideas, we may simply cease to exist. In your opinion, after the war, could Ukraine become a kind of role model for reforming militaries, given the nature of war that is taking place here?
That would be the world's biggest book. There are countless lessons for the U.S. and others to learn from your experience, and we ignore those lessons at our own peril. We must learn, and we should work together with you. And we shouldn't wait till after the war. We should be learning them now, because again, we have to get those in the DNA of our forces. We can't wait. It takes time for others to learn. You're learning in the fight, which is the fastest way to learn because your survival depends on it. But if we don't learn, we are truly failing our nations and failing our young men and women who are wearing the uniform in our nations. We have to learn, and personally, I'm disappointed we don't have more people here on the ground, day to day, watching and learning side by side.
We discussed innovations in the Ukrainian military with retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery and retired U.S. Air Force Major General Charles Corcoran. This is To The Point project by the UAF Media Center. Stay safe.